So most of the time, it's you can't say that mini drama series is the right format, or like mini documentary series is the right format, or you should tell your story or customer story. It really depends on all of those factors. And the number one factor is understanding your audience. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hi guys. We have Somi Arian here with us, and Somi is the founder and managing director of Smart Cookie Media. So her aim is to help established brands stay relevant in the modern digital age. So Somi also created a documentary, The Millennial Disruption. So it's about the millennial disruption and how advancements in technology disrupted all aspects of business and culture. So in the past 2 years, she has also interviewed over 40 hours of C-level executives, from the Economist to Mary Claire Bentley, and also to Gary Vaynerchuk. So Somi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. And despite being busy, thanks for taking the time to do this interview.
You're welcome.
So I loved your documentary, The Millennial Disruption. My question is, like right now it's 2019, and most marketers or most C-level executives already know, they need to appeal or need to reach out to millennials. But as of today, there are still many brands who are behind when it comes to reaching out to millennials. Can you share with us, any reasons why?
Sure. Yeah, it's something that we deal with every day on a daily basis. As I go into a lot of companies, discuss with them, and everybody knows that they need to do it. There are a number of reasons why it's not happening. It's mostly to do with their workload. Most of the time, people, generally speaking, in a lot of management areas, people always tend to put things that are urgent above things that are important. Okay, so there are things that are like on a daily basis when you're running a business, or if you're in marketing, there are lots of things that come onto your attention, and they will be put on your desk that you have to deal with. And things that are more important and are about brand building and development usually gets pushed to the back of the queue for them to be dealing with. So that's the main reason, I would say. It's not that they don't want to. I don't think it's a lack of foresight or it's a lack of understanding. It's really most of the time the structure of the company, it's not built in such a way to allow them the time for innovation and to have the time to actually think about the future and develop. That's from, in all honesty, I think that's from my experience, that's the number one reason a lot of management and marketers fail to look, future-proof themselves.
Yeah, so a lot of times they are bogged down by work, and they are mostly focused on the quarterly earnings, the bottom line. So when you approach, for example, a Fortune 500 company, how do you persuade them to transition into this new way of marketing? Because they've always been so used to quarterly ads, quarterly teams, and newspaper and TV ads. So what is the message when you communicate to, like, for example, a marketing director?
Honestly, I don't try to persuade them. I think there's not really any point in trying to do that. It would be a waste of my time. I say what I need to say, and I create a lot of content. I put it out there. People see it, hear it, and they talk about it. Like, for example, I got contacted by a lady who follows me on LinkedIn, who mentioned that she had seen my content, and she was talking to like the managing director or CEO of a bank, and they were talking about millennials. Then she was reminded of my content, and she told this gentleman that I know somebody who can help you with that. So that's kind of like how it happens. So I create content, I put it out there, And I put a lot of time, effort, money into my content. Even though I'm a producer myself, I put a lot of resources into it, and I just put the message out there. I don't think there's a way that you can convince people. It's not. I don't really try to convince them. That's the real answer.
Yeah. I think I like what Gary Vaynerchuk sometimes says. He says, don't waste time convincing the unconvincible. And I do believe that, inbound clients are the best clients. It's more like, how can I work with you and how much? It's not like whether or not your ways work. So that's the best way of, to get corporate clients.
That's right.
Yeah. So a lot of your content I really love. And, a lot of your content sometimes talk about the heritage brands, like something like Louis Vuitton or something like, Steinway pianos. So, can you tell my audience, how should a heritage brand, leverage on the new wave of social media?
Oh, to be honest with you, it's no different to any other brand. So the way that they need to leverage social media is no different to how a challenger brand would do, or any other brand that's not necessarily a heritage brand would do. Everybody is in the same boat. And this is one of the things that I always explain in my talks, in my content, is that it doesn't matter whether you have hundreds of years of heritage. You are now in the same boat with challenger brands, because you need to reintroduce yourself to people. You need to be able to explain to younger generation that maybe either they don't have a conception of you, they don't have an understanding of what you do, you've never been on top of their mind. So either you have to explain to them and introduce yourself to them from scratch, just like any other brand, or you may have an even harder task on your hands, and that is that you need to rebuild brand perception, right? Recreate brand perception, which is even harder. Say, for example, a brand like Jaguar, okay? So if you already have a perception in your head that Jaguar, like the old James Bond, is for old guys, right? So if you want to now build a perception of Jaguar as being a brand that an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old person might want to consider, it's much harder than if you're Tesla and you're starting out from scratch. So in many cases, for heritage brands, it's actually harder because they need to reintroduce themselves and they need to rebuild brand perception. So I would say that that's probably the main difference. Other than that, the actual mechanics of content creation and content distribution is no different. It's the same for all of us.
Great. Love all the insights over there. So a lot of times when people say creating content, they always say the keyword, which is authenticity. So my personal opinion is that what I feel about the heritage brands is there's not much authenticity. You can't, because maybe the maker is not there anymore. It's not maybe an entrepreneur brand anymore. It's now a very established brand. So how can a heritage brand, achieve authenticity?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually, very interesting, because as you know, at the moment, our biggest client is Steinway pianos. Steinway was established 162 years ago, and the original owners of Steinway are no longer the actual Steinway family. So Steinway and Sons is now bought by an American entrepreneur, and it's run in a different family and in a different environment. So it's not like a family business the way it was. However, the Steinway and Sons brand, it's still Steinway and Sons brand, and it will always be, because the perception that Steinway built as being the best pianos in the world, the most expensive pianos, the best pianos, it's like everything's handmade, that is still there. That story is still there. So what it takes for heritage brands today is that if they don't have anything to hide, I think that in many respects, for fashion brands, it's difficult. If you're talking about Burberry or Louis Vuitton, I can't say that they don't have anything to hide, because some of their practices are not entirely environmentally friendly. There are certain things they're doing that, I mean, this is not something that I'm just like, this is public knowledge that, for example, Burberry and and I believe Louis Vuitton, a lot of these brands, they actually burn a lot of their, like, millions of pounds or dollars worth of their products. They burn it so that they don't go on to sale, right? So that's obviously not a very environmentally friendly thing to do. So they do have lots of things that they can't really talk about. It is hard for them to be entirely authentic. But a brand like Steinway or Bentley, these are brands that they can be completely open and authentic, because you go to the factory and you see, like, all these craftsmen working really hard, like to build a piano, or to build sometimes like a Patek Philippe watch, or something like a Bentley. It takes months, sometimes several years, to build some of these, like, unique things. So if they have that kind of authentic story to tell, they should say it, they should tell it. And then in terms of the fact that there is no body from the original family, that's not a problem. So, for example, with Steinway here in London, the Steinway MD, Craig Terry, that we work with quite a lot, and he was in my documentary as well. We just recently went to Florence with him, and we went to another company called Baldy, where they are putting these jewels on a Steinway, and it's a beautiful story. It's a 3-minute film that is so captivating, so interesting. But what is happening here is that the staff are becoming the front person on camera. They're going to go and tell the story. So the story doesn't always have to come from the brand owners, if you know what I mean. Like that, the actual staff of a company can become the face of the brand and go into.
So when it comes to heritage brands, there's so much history. There's so much craftsmanship, and they should use social media to leverage all their history and everything that they have. So one of the things when it comes to social media or content, it has to be something that consumers like to consume. When we watch Gary Vaynerchuk, we like to watch his daily videos. So when I watch your content, I like to watch your LinkedIn video content. So are there any brands out there that or besides your own clients, that have created content in such a way that it is like attractive to consume?
I can't say that. I mean, I always give the example of Apple and Amazon. Especially Amazon is doing really well with the Amazon Prime series. I haven't really seen that many, and of course, obviously Netflix, but they are in the business of content, so it's slightly different. But I can't say I don't really consume a lot of content, and even Gary's content, I used to listen and watch quite a lot of it early days when I started my own company. But nowadays, since I'm writing my book and my own content quite a lot, I don't really have time to consume a lot of content. I can't tell you that what I have in mind, the type of thing that I've got in mind that I'm trying to explain to clients, I haven't really seen many people do that. And I can't say there isn't. When I go to my Instagram feed, I don't see anything jumping at me thinking that, oh, these guys really are doing something interesting. What is happening though is that a lot of influencers that are creating interesting kind of like mini snippets of comedy drama on Instagram and YouTube, which I think that there's a lot of potential in brands leveraging that concept. But I haven't really seen many brands do that. I think, the problem is that a lot of brands, they take themselves too seriously, and they almost feel like it's beneath them to create interesting or funny or entertaining content. And that's quite a shame, because there is a lot of opportunity for brands to leverage kind of some form of comedy drama or mini drama format to create interesting content. So that's the main issue.
Yeah, I love what you said just now. A lot of brands feel that creating content is sometimes beneath them. So, what sort of direction should a brand take when it comes to content? Should they take a mini series of their staff, or create videos about their story? What is the content direction we can do for 2019?
I have actually talked about this extensively in my digital marketing course. It's really it's not like a formula. You need to start with audience profiling. You need to really understand your audience, and then you need to understand the capacity of your team, your budget, and the production value that you want to put out at the level. You need to decide on all of those things, and then you need to have a good team of producers and content creators, people who understand social media and have actually built social media profiles, who know exactly what it takes, and also have a good production background. And then you put the two together and you come up with a formula. Like, for example, now I have come up with a formula for my content. Now, for when it comes to Steinway, I've come up with a formula for them. It's not exactly what I would like it to be 100%, because they are not yet fully ready to jump into exactly what I want them to jump into. It takes time, baby steps. It takes time for companies to change direction, but we are going in the right direction with them. So most of the time, it's you can't say that mini drama series is the right format, or like mini documentary series is the right format, or you should tell your story or customer story. It really depends on all of those factors. And the number one factor is understanding your audience. What is your audience going to respond to best, which is within your budget, right? And within your capacity. So audience, and then it comes to your creating and distributing content.
Yeah. So the practicality and the capacity, the size of the team and the budget, plays a big role when it comes to creating content. Based on the budget, you choose what is most important to the brand at the moment of time. So there's no fixed formula. So you briefly said that a lot of influencers are creating great content, and that's what a lot of people follow now.
I didn't say it's great content. I didn't say it's great content. I said it's entertaining. Like, they are figuring out what people react to and what people like to watch and to be entertained. I'm not saying that necessarily it's great, but they are entertaining, and they're doing some good stuff on Instagram. A lot of it is starting to become very samey, because there's only so much you could do that. But yeah, there are people that are doing some interesting stuff.
Great. It's very like attention seeking, and a lot of times it's very very entertaining. So have you what is your opinion on how brands should leverage on influencers? Should they be like a sponsored content, or should they be like a subtle feature in their content? What's your opinion on that?
I have said this before. I talked about it very briefly in the documentary. I talk about it more actually in my course. I'm not a huge fan of influencer marketing in general. I feel like brands need to become influencers, and they need to build their own platforms, their own content. It's an easy kind of way out to say, oh yes, let's work with this influencer and just ask them to wear this and then take a picture and put it out. That's like, it's an easy way out for a lot of marketing people to say, okay, we tick the box and we've done that. So the real value is in actually building your own content. If you're working with influencers, it should be more in terms of collaboration, where you are building your own content and then invite them to your content. Say, for example, when I did my documentary, that's one form of influencer marketing. When I bring in people that are in an influencer in my industry, and invite them into my platform, which in this case was my documentary, right? So to have people like Gary Vaynerchuk and, you know, The Economist, Mary Claire, Bentley, Jaguar, that is influencer marketing. That's the way to think about influencer marketing. You know, where people think about, when people think influencer marketing, they think, okay, we're going to just like give our product to some influencer to picture themselves. For example, I saw, I love Evian water, and I saw a picture of somebody posting that, obviously some form of influencer marketing that Evian water is doing, posting a picture on Instagram that I thought it was an interesting concept. What he said is, it was like, you know, it's like 90% of our body is water, and I drink Evian, so I'm 90% Evian. I thought that was an interesting concept, but why couldn't Evian itself use that concept to create, you know, some piece of interesting content about that? Like the fact that so much of your body is water. You could create hundreds of episodes of content just on that subject. But obviously, Evian water will have paid a lot of money to this influencer to take that one picture to post it on, right? And now if Evian water wanted to use that concept and create their own content, it might take them a year to build to the level of the following level of that influencer, but it would make a lot more impact in the long run. So then if they had that, if they had their own content, then they could invite that influencer into their program or into their content and do it more as a collaboration rather than, what I'm trying to say is that most people think of influencer marketing as delegation. It shouldn't be delegation. It should be collaboration.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of marketers just want the visibility. Oh, this influencer has 20,000 followers. That's the visibility. But like you said, it's more about the collaboration rather than the visibility. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
So my next question would be, when it comes to, you said a lot of brands should be an influencer. So what is your opinion, the best way to do it? So some of the clients that I work with, you know, I try to make the owner or the founder of the brand the influencer. But sometimes it's a better approach to keep the person out of the brand. You know, like when Apple was big in its time, it was Steve Jobs. But, you know, what is the right way, or there's no right way, but what's your opinion when it comes to being a brand and using the owner as the influencer?
So again, this is another subject that I talk about in my course, that for example, in the case of our brand, our company, we are using my image to build the company brand. So we are using my personal brand to build the company brand. That's not necessarily always the right approach. You know, like that's what Gary Vaynerchuk is doing. That's what Virgin, for example, they have. I forgot his name.
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson, yes, of course, yeah. Obviously, he's not doing a very good job because I forgot his name. But yeah, so for example, Virgin is using Richard Branson's image. So that's not necessarily always the right way. Just like I said earlier with Steinway, we're at the moment in the UK, we are using the managing director. Obviously, that's not necessarily possible to do all around the world. But I do think that if you are not using your main brand influencer or your main kind of brand, key person of influence essentially in your brand, if you're not using that, then the next best thing is to have a series of people in the team. You know, like have a number of people that are all part of that image building. But somehow you need to be able to show behind the scenes of your brand. It doesn't always have to be about that one person. It can be about several people. But somehow you need to be able to show not necessarily about one person.
Cool. Thanks so much, Somi. So I think thanks for your insights and for your advice. So we'll connect soon and speak to you again on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Somi.
All right.